Congressman LaTourette, thanks for joining us this week.
Yep.
So we've had a couple of interesting things transpire over the last week. The one that's kind of garnered the lion's share of attention has been the fight over the debt ceiling. The past couple fights have kind of gone to the brink, and there's been a lot of saber rattling and talk about default. This time, while there was some angling beforehand, we saw it pass in both the House and the Senate. Talk to us about what happened in the House. I think what happened there is probably the most interesting thing that happened this week.
Yeah, it is interesting, and what it's sort of like Yogi Berra used to say, deja vu all over again. So you had the debt limit coming up, and by all accounts, Treasury Secretary Lew said it had to be accomplished by the end of February. The Congress will not be here next week for the President's Day recess, so it was really now or never. And Speaker Boehner floated a lot of different ideas. He said, should we tie it to the Keystone Pipeline? Should we tie it to something in the Affordable Care Act? Should we tie it to the pension issue for military retirees who were involved in the last deal? And in all of those instances, he could not get 218 votes out of the Republican conference. And because it had debt ceiling attached to it, he could not count on 218 votes. And so the Democrats, rightfully so, they sort of sit back and say, well, we're not going to help you with your own mess. And so he made the decision, and I think it was a great decision to go forward. And on the final vote, you only had 28 Republicans vote to raise the debt ceiling. You had 199 say no. All of the Democrats voted for it, except for two. And then it went over to the Senate, and I believe in the Senate it got something like 64, 67 votes. And now it'll be on its way to the President's desk. And so for those at home keeping score, the debt ceiling has been increased till March of 2015. And they didn't pick that date out of coincidence. They picked that date because it's after the midterm elections. They also picked that date because when Congress comes in January, not much happens, in January and February, and so March will really be the first time that people are getting down to legislating. But I think the untold story is that because the government shut down and the last debt ceiling fight was so ugly, and in my opinion, damaged the Republican Party nationwide, it benefited some people, like Senator Cruz and others. Their popularity went up, but the Republican brand was damaged. And this coming election, from the Republican perspective, is going to be all about the Affordable Care Act. And they have some poll numbers that show that's not going so well for the Democrats. And John Boehner, I think, did not want to be the issue. He did not want the president and his party to be able to change the subject and talk about crazy Republicans, and I think he's achieved that. And then some groups will continue to grouse. The usual suspects, the conservative, ultra-conservative groups who called it a big mistake, whipped against it, and so forth and so on. But I think it was a good call.
When is the last time that you remember a speaker bringing a piece of legislation to the floor to pass that had so few members from his own party? I mean, this was really Boehner walking out on the plank on this issue.
Yeah, it was, and it never happened in my career. Because the whole reason you want the majority and to have the speaker be of your party is that you determine what gets voted on, when it gets voted on, if it gets voted on. And so for him to put it forward knowing, they just don't throw it up for a vote and say, gosh, I wonder who's going to show up and vote for it. They knew it was only going to be, in the high 20s, maybe low 30s. And for him to do that takes a great deal of political courage.
Well, and then it went on to the Senate, where we heard that some of the Ted Cruz folks, they were going to filibuster it, which forced Harry Reid and the Democrats to get 60 votes, which they eventually got, which included the votes of Mitch McDonald, the minority leader, and John Cornyn. Not exactly the usual suspects when it comes to these things. Again, was this a matter of kind of following John Boehner's lead and deciding that, hey, we don't want the midterm elections to be about obstructionist Republicans. We want it to be laser focused on the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And the debt ceiling is really not the place to have a fight anyway. And I think Senator McConnell and Speaker Boehner both recognize that. Because unlike some of the appropriations bills, Raising the debt limit is about whether or not the United States can honor its obligations. And if you really think about it beyond sort of the bumper sticker and the sort of, oh, shut the whole thing down, and of course we can default, if the cost of money to the United States were just to go up a little bit as a result of lowering of our country's credit rating, it would cost trillions over the next 10 years. And so it's really a stupid thing to do. And I think you're exactly right, that going into 2014, the Republicans, and we've talked about this before, this is the president's 6-year election. Presidents in their 6th year always lose seats in both houses. The Republicans think that they can become the majority party in the Senate. And the only thing in some Republicans' minds that can prevent that is Republicans screwing up. And so this takes one off the table.
Well, now to talk about an issue that I feel like talking about Groundhog Day, I feel like we've talked about this issue over and over again over the last year, and that's immigration reform. And the roller coaster continues once again. You know, it seemed like it was dead, and then it was resuscitated and dead, and resuscitated and dead, and resuscitated. And last week things looked better, and then all of a sudden things started looking bad again. Talk to us about kind of the next turn that is that's taken here.
Well, this is a good example of something that the Republicans, in my opinion, didn't handle well in the face of the midterm elections, except from unifying their base, I guess. But so when we last visited this issue, you had Speaker Boehner laid out the principles for immigration reform. You then had the White House and even some Democrats saying, yeah, it's not everything we want, but yeah, it's a good start, and we can work with it, and so forth and so on. And again, for those that may not remember it, it dealt with not a pathway to citizenship, but a pathway to legal status. It dealt with fixing the problem of children who, through no fault of their own, were brought by their parents into the country and giving them some hope. It dealt with border security, and it dealt with income verification and a guest worker program primarily for agricultural workers. Pretty tame stuff, you know, but the pathway to legal status is certainly a lightning rod. Well, no sooner had that sort of been digested in the public domain when Mitch McDonald was the first one that sort of came out and said, oh, no, we're not going to do that in 2014. There then was sort of an uprising in the House Republican Conference, and you had Speaker Boehner, whose idea this had been, and I believe in his heart knows that we have to do something about immigration and these many people that are here without legal status. And he then announced that it wasn't going to happen in 2014. At the end of the day, I think that Boehner would not have done that if McConnell had not. And the reason I say that is that you know, one criticism that happens that goes against party leaders on a regular basis around here is that if one house and its rank and file members are asked to carry something that's never going to happen in the other body, all you've done is you've set your members up for failure. And you may remember when Mrs. Pelosi was the Speaker and the House produced a carbon tax bill, cap and trade. Well, and so she broke a lot of arms in the House to get her members on board, some that from Ohio, you know, Zach Space and a couple of others that weren't really inclined to think this was a good idea. But she demanded their vote. They gave it to her. And then the Senate never touched the issue. But in the election, they then, you know, these folks lost the election because their opponents just hammered away, particularly in Ohio, a coal-producing state, on the carbon tax. And so I think Boehner said, look, you know, I'm not going to ask my guys to vote on a red-hot issue, that being immigration, if there's no chance of the Senate taking it up.
Well, before we close, I wanted to ask you, the kind of conventional wisdom right now has been that, you know, Congress is almost done doing everything it's going to do this year. You know, we got the budget deal, we got the appropriations bills passed. You know, we have avoided a fight over the debt limit. The debt ceiling has been raised. Is there anything else that's kind of hanging around out there that people aren't talking about that folks should be interested in?
Well, the one sort of piece of legislation that may have life is the 6-year transportation reauthorization bill. And the problem has always been is everybody loves transportation. Everybody loves to build roads and bridges and put people to work and things like that, but nobody wants to pay for it. I mean, it's the same old story here. And so you have a chairman from Pennsylvania, Bill Schuster, who was You know, I think making the right noises about wanting to fix that problem. If he's successful, yeah, you could have a highway bill that would mean something for jobs and economic recovery in this country. But if I was asked to lay a bet today, I would tell you that these forces that we've been talking about consistently will put the kibosh on that, because anything that smells of a user fee increase like the gas tax, anything that talks about revenue raiser, anything that talks about a whole host of other things, probably non-starters. And these men and women have shown the ability to throw the monkey wrench into this thing. But the specific answer to your question is, yeah, we could have a highway bill if the stars align in a certain way.
Well, we'll be sure to follow over the next few months exactly how those stars align.
Perfect.
Congressman Latreille, once again,
Good
thanks
to see
for
you.
joining us.
Thank you.